Being a retail worker is the most common job in the United States right now. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman with a high school education making between $11 and $12 an hour. So what do those workers do when 30% of the malls and stores close in the next 5 years? And then truckers are next in line, by the 5 to 10 year mark. So it's like we have to get our acts together before these populations end up getting displaced.
The socioeconomic impact of automation-driven job losses are making our people more hungry, more violent, and therefore more politically active.
And then Donald Trump wins the election in 2016. And for whatever reason, in my opinion, the media is just not being honest about all the economic drivers. They're blaming racism, Russia, Facebook, the FBI. And if you look at the voter district data on a district-by-district basis, there's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial robots in that voting district and the movement towards Trump. Like, it's a straight economic story where we blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs in the swing states, and Donald Trump is our president. So imagine being me and then seeing that and being like, okay, I get it. This is an economic, technological story. And then I went to people in Washington, D.C. I was like, hey, guys, what are we going to do? We're in the third inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of our country. And the third inning has brought us Donald Trump. The fourth, fifth, sixth innings are going to be horrific. What are we going to do? And then the answers I got were somewhere between disappointing and horrifying.
Like this, software is eating marketing.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Well, so the bigger one is software is eating the world.
Yes.
So,
Forget marketing. It's eating the whole world.
Well, I was thinking of the audience.
Marketing is a
So
subset
software
of
is
that.
eating the world and therefore will leave what kind of world behind?
A software world. A very, very exciting world with lots of code and lots of programmers. So,
So everybody should.
Where everyone can check
everybody
their
should want
wrists
their.
all day.
exactly, everybody can read email on their wrists. All
So
day long.
would you want your children to grow up and be software programmers?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no question.
All right.
I've sent my son.
You did? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little
First
bit-
they learn Chinese and then they want to learn
Yeah,
software
I mean,
programming.
it's actually a little bit of a tangent and a sad story, but I sent my son, he's 7, to ID Tech Camp at Stanford.
Yeah.
And there were 35 kids, 7-year-olds, 30 boys and 5 girls.
Okay, so tell me how software is eating industry.
So it's the result of the fact that we put computers now in so many places. It's the result of the fact that all businesses, effectively all businesses now run on computers. It's the fact that we now all are going to have computers in our pockets. And so we can finally start to imagine in basically in every business, in every industry, in every sector, what would it be like? I mean, the thought experiment I like to run is what if the team at Facebook or the team at Google actually said, I'm now going to go transform education. I'm going to go transform healthcare. I'm going to go transform government. I'm going to go transform law. Or in this case, I'm going to go transform marketing.
And then I went to people in Washington, D.C. I was like, hey, guys, what are we going to do? We're in the third inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of our country. And the third inning has brought us Donald Trump. The fourth, fifth, sixth innings are going to be horrific. What are we going to do? And then the answers I got were somewhere between disappointing and horrifying. Where if you go to mainstream politicians and you're like, what are we going to do? The answers I got were literally, number one, we cannot talk about that. Number two, we should study that.
We cannot talk about that.
That's verbatim.
Really?
Yeah.
And why were they saying that?
Because it seems alarmist, like anti-progress, or like, you're like, throwing stones at like big tech companies. And it's like, I'm not throwing stones at anyone. I'm just pointing out the facts. So number one was can't talk about it. Number two was need to study it. And then number three was the point you made originally, which was we must educate and retrain Americans for the jobs of the future.
Hey everyone. Today we'll be looking at the largest employers in each U.S. state. It takes a lot of manpower to keep the country running, so it'll come as no surprise that the federal and state government are the top employers in almost every U.S. state. One unique exception is in the Big Apple, where the city's massive municipal government is the largest employer in the entire state. When we add military employment to the mix, we end up with 8 states that have more active personnel than any single private employer. For another perspective, let's exclude direct government and military employers and instead look at the private sector. Right away, we can see that healthcare and education are top employers in a number of cases. It's worth noting that even in places where a university is at the top of the list, a major component of the employee base often comes from affiliated healthcare facilities. A few states buck this trend in a way that highlights regional industries. For example, General Motors is the top employer in Michigan, at least for the time being. In Nevada, MGM Resorts employs over 55,000 people. But perhaps the most evident trend in this map is the dominance of a specific company, Walmart. Walmart is the largest private employer on the planet, with over 1.5 million employees in the US alone. That's equivalent to 1% of America's total private sector workforce. Today, the company has over 5,300 stores across the country, and when you look at the expansion of Walmart locations over the past 50 years, it's easy to see how the company came to dominate employment in the southern states. Walmart's growth went hand in hand with a population boom across the South, and by the 90s, blue big box stores were popping up across the nation. The company's home state of Arkansas is still heavily influenced by the retail giant. The state has by far the most Walmart locations per capita, and the company employs 4% of the state's total workforce. Put another way, nearly 1/3 of the state's retail employees work for Walmart. Even though the retail sector is undergoing big changes, Walmart is still the biggest company in the world by revenue, so it's sure to remain a top employer for the foreseeable future. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, what about Amazon? The e-commerce giant is now the nation's second largest employer, but unless there are more Whole Foods-sized acquisitions in the company's future, this map is unlikely to change anytime soon. While Amazon's growth is astonishing, a reliance on contract workers and the continued automation of their supply chain will likely keep employee counts below Walmart in the near term.
And so then I was grappling with it, and I'm a parent like you are, and I looked at my kids and I was like, am I really going to bring them up in this shit show? Like, is this really the plan?
Right.
And so then I was like, okay, how would you actually solve this problem if you had to do so? And so then I said, okay, universal basic income rebranded the freedom dividend after we did a bunch of tests because it tests much better as the freedom dividend than universal basic income. And then try and make the rules of the economy work better for more people as fast as we can before this automation wave really crescendos.
What do you mean by that?
Well, to me, what I'm saying is retail and truck driving are the two major obvious sectors that are going to get displaced. Being a retail worker is the most common job in the United States right now. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman with a high school education making between $11 and $12 an hour. So what do those workers do when 30% of the malls and stores close in the next 5 years? And then truckers are next in line, by the 5 to 10 year mark. So it's like we have to get our acts together before these populations end up getting displaced.